Welcome to Breakaway, the minor hockey podcast brought to you by the OMHA. I'm Wilbur, founder of the Coaches site. And as always, I'm joined by Ian Taylor, Executive Director of the Ontario Minor Hockey Association. Ian, how you doing?
Great, Aaron. Great to see you.
Likewise, my man. How was Halloween?
Halloween was a very different experience than your experience. My kids are...
They're older, yeah.
Well, they're older, yeah. And, yeah, so...
Do you get the house done up, like in your neighborhood? You don't?
No.
You Halloween Scrooge.
Those days are over. They're over. I'm done.
But I bet, and I have no evidence of this. I bet you still enjoy the treat aspect of it.
Yeah, no question, absolutely.
Yeah. What's your go-to? Are you like a chocolate person, or are you like on the sweet side?
Oh, both. I take it all. Honestly, yeah. That's my
weakness.
Well, see, I don't think it's a weakness. That's something my wife would say. She would say that's my weakness, but I'm more of a aficionado is what I would call myself.
Wow.
I love it all.
I see. I know. I'm hard onto the sweets, but I have to live my life. Like if we never have candy or chips or anything in the house again, I'm good. I never touch it. But if I know it's in the house, like my radar goes off, and I'm like, in my mantra, like, hey, like there's anybody who doesn't eat the entire bag of chips. I don't understand that. Like, I'm like, if there's chips, you eat all the chips till you get to the bottom of the bag in one shot.
That's right.
But my wife could have she'll have like a piece of chalk. She breaks off the squares. And I'm like,
yeah. I got no time for that either. No,
I agree. Good stuff. But you're right. We had a good Halloween here. It was lots of fun with our little guy who got dressed up. But and of course, if we're talking Halloween, we're about what, 1/4 of the way through the hockey season. It's probably the benchmark.
Yeah, maybe not quite that far, but yeah. I mean, we started a little later, right? So, which again, a little bit of runway at the beginning of the year, which is I'm a big fan of, big proponent of, and allowing teams to get going. And but but it's well on its way for sure.
Well, I'll tell you what. We're recording this after we had our conversation with today's guest, who of course is Rico Phillips, who is the OHL's Director of Cultural Diversity and Inclusion. I didn't know what to expect. I know you've met Rico before. This is my first time chatting with him. I didn't know what to expect, but he's an impressive dude.
Yeah, and Rico came out along with Tara Sloan and spoke at our annual general meeting in June, and that was the first time I had met Rico as well. But he's he's a unique guy. He's captivating, and the beauty of it, and I think we'll talk about it, is I left our chat yesterday I really enjoyed our conversation. I took stuff away from it, and I felt good about the conversation. You know what I mean? Like I felt positive about the conversation, about where that conversation belongs in our sport and in our sport, in sport in general, in society in general. But I think that's where the magic is that it wasn't a lecture. It was a conversation. And I think that's what I enjoyed most about our chat yesterday.
It's so funny you say that, because my takeaway was similar. I'm like, he was such a good listener. You know what I mean? And I could see where somebody in that role, be it, in sort of the forum that we were in on an interview, on a podcast, or if they were walking to a locker room, it would be so easy to come in there with sort of your key points you want to get across and go talk to people and try and get it all out there, versus saying, hey, like I want to appreciate where you're coming from and learn about where you're coming from. And then there's going to be a two-way dialogue about this subject, which admittedly could very easily be, maybe an uncomfortable conversation. You know,
Sure.
when you're talking about with the group of, especially in his role, where he's talking with a group of teenagers in a sport where, I mean, let's face it, like part of the conversation has to be, hey, we're a predominantly white sport and we're
Sure.
trying to change that, but we got to be honest about where we're at. So, yeah, it takes a special individual and man, and also like good on the OHL. Like I'm
Yeah.
not familiar with, I know obviously the NHL has taken some steps, but this is the first instance that I'm aware of. And if anybody wants to correct me, please do, where a junior or amateur league has created a position like this and been proactive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, I think, like you say, I think you can, I don't think we'd be wrong to think someone would, you know, would come in and tell us you must do this and
Yeah.
do not do this. And whereas, I know there's one point, Rico was talking about, basically you can do whatever you like in your life, but when you come here, when you come to our team
Yeah.
or you come to our
Yeah.
event, there's a different standard. And that's empowering versus like again don't do this, don't do that. It was like we have a standard here and an expectation, and that makes you kind of lift up, right? Like that makes you aspire to something. I just like that's the main one I left the call with, Aaron. The other one was Rico came, fully acknowledges when he says he had his own blind spots, right? He said we all
Yeah.
have blind spots, and he said he came into this position, he had his own blind spots. So that was the other one. That was probably the two points I was thinking about yesterday after we finished our call, and then even this morning. Really registered with me.
Yeah. And you know what? It's such a great point about, how the way he framed it, that, hey, you can think whatever you want. But when you're on our team, because that's actionable, right? Like if you're like, I put myself in the shoes of a coach or, team manager at the minor
Right.
hockey level where, I mean, I live it as a parent now, like there's the kids are a team, but the parents are kind of their own team as well. And if they can, I say this all the time, like if the parents can get together and find a way to mesh and be aligned, then that's going to have a huge impact on the experience the kids have and just the
Sure.
team's overall performance, right? But it's tough. Like, how do you get a group of adults in a room, like, and say, hey, this is like, to your point, this is how we all have to think and how we all have to behave versus a great framework. Say, hey, I get everybody's coming from different backgrounds, but in our team, when we're together, this is what's going to be acceptable and not acceptable. And I think that gave people some just sort of clear direction, and that's super valuable. And I think the other part too, like his blind spots, like I think listen, as human beings, we all believe the way that we think is right,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I think it does. I think we need to hear them the way he acknowledged that. I think it puts all of us in a position where it's like, hey, like maybe we all need to step back and say, hey, like let's be open to some different ideas and do we have blind spots as individuals? Because inherently, of course, we do. Like
Yeah.
we're human beings. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, love that the OHL has taken that step, and I think just lastly. That's a really unique role. Like, I don't know how you would hire for that role, but I mean, just the fact that you have to go in to a locker room full of teenagers and have some tough conversations. Like, not everybody's equipped to do that. Like, to really, to really actually make a connection. Like, it's one thing to get up there and like, run through a PowerPoint, but to actually connect with people. And that was like, like that was my takeaway. Like, I'm like, this person, Rico's someone that again, I've never talked to the players, but I would venture to say that when he leaves that room or leaves that conversation, they've listened and it's sunk in, which is powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And quite honestly, like he had that impact on me. I know, we talked, he had that impact on you. So, do I think that his delivery is and messaging is translates to junior players, and he mentioned, his involvement, in the Flint inner city, minor hockey,
Which is so
youth
cool,
hockey.
yeah.
So do I think it translates? Yeah, I think it translates totally.
Yeah, well, you know what? We'll jump into it in a sec here, but last week I was down in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, getting ready for a conference, and we went to a football game. Michigan State, 112,000 people showed up at the stadium. I don't know how many more were outside tailgating, but it just was a really good reminder for me that you have people from like all different walks of life, black, white, Hispanic, religious, like, but they all came together, and when they all, they belong to something, and they could get along, and they could find that common ground and have conversations. And I think it's the same thing. Like, we forget, like, there is a power in sport, and if you can get young people in particular in a diverse locker room, and they can get to know other kids, and they can sort of break down those barriers and any apprehensions they have, that's just going to serve them so well for the balance of their life. So I think it is really important that our game, that we all make those efforts to make our game more inclusive, because our kids are just going to be in a way better spot, just viewing everybody as equals as they go through that journey of life. So
it's awesome. Yeah, totally agree.
Well, hey, listen, let's jump into it. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for everybody for tuning in, and please enjoy our conversation with Rico Phillips, the OHL's Director of Cultural Diversity and Inclusion. The Coaches Site is a proud partner of the OMHA, along with many of the top development organizations in the world. The Coaches Site was created to provide hockey's top coaches, leaders, and performance experts with the platform to share their experience and insights with amateur coaches and minor hockey organizations, with the goal of enhancing the development opportunity for all players. A membership includes access to 500 hours of educational videos, a library of over 700 drills, articles breaking down the latest tactics and systems, and our newly released Initiation Skills Series, which provides a video-based development curriculum for the first 3 years of a player's minor hockey career. Regardless of the level you coach, the Coaches Site is going to provide you the ultimate coaching toolkit. Listeners of the Breakaway podcast can save 25% off an annual membership by using the code OMHA when they register. Again, use the code OMHA and get registered today. All right, we're back on Breakaway, and pleased to be joined by Rico Phillips, the OHL's Director of Cultural Diversity and Inclusion. Rico, great to see you.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Aaron. It's hey, hockey season's underway, full steam ahead, as they say, right?
Well, nobody knows that better than Ian Taylor. And so, Rico, just maybe to start off with, you've got I love the backdrop here. Can you what's the story behind some of these jerseys, because it's quite eclectic?
Well, it started off as when the virtual world first took off in 2020, about 2020 or so, 2021. I was invited to do a podcast, and this room that I'm in is turned to an office. It used to be my son's bedroom, and there's one area on the wall as I'm setting up to do, I'm looking at myself, and I looked over my shoulder, and there was a hole in the wall. So I was like, all right, what can I put over it? And I looked over, and I just so happened to have a jersey sitting there, so I put it over there. And I was like, well, that looks kind of weird. One jersey over my right shoulder. So I put a couple more jerseys up. They really weren't. There was a couple that were significant in my life, but so that's how it started. And then once I started working with the OHL, the teams that I work with say, hey, man, you need a Firebirds jersey, or you need a Colts jersey. And so it just started. I was like, yeah, I sure do. So then it started becoming a collection of OHL jerseys. So that's where I'm at today. And I've got plenty more, but I've only got so much wall that makes sense. So there you go.
Well, Rico, don't feel bad, because if there's a hole in my house, that's my DIY solution too, is just hang a hockey jersey in front of it, and
Totally. Now, Aaron, I don't know if you know this, but Rico was our guest speaker at our at the OMHA's annual general meeting, our our awards evening, and Rico and Tara Sloan came out and spoke to our group, and we had a great night and a great conversation, and it was very much like this conversation today, kind of unscripted and just kind of open, which was awesome. And then I'll tell you, next time I saw Rico I went to opening weekend up in the Sioux to watch the Greyhounds play, and before the game, I see Rico up on the scoreboard. So he's talking to the crowd, and it's talking about the OHL's code of conduct. And I was just like, I said to my wife, I'm like, I know that guy, and so
That's cool.
you know what? It was cool. It was cool because we had met. It was cool because we had talked, and I'd heard kind of some of your messaging and what the OHL was trying to do, and then but what caught me off guard, Rico, is and I know you've talked to players and you've talked to teams, and obviously I'm sure you get phone calls when there's issues, but this was talking to an arena of almost 5,000 people, opening night in the Sioux, and the messaging was going out to those people too. So when we talk about the audience of when we're talking about code of conduct, or we're talking about making our sport more inclusive and more diverse, it just caught me. It caught me. I thought it was really cool. So I'm glad you guys are doing that, but maybe speak to that a little bit about, because sometimes I think we just talk about like when there's issues, you know what I mean? And this was sharing a message that, this is what we're about, I guess, or this is what we believe in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that, the feedback on that too. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback,
nice.
And it is. Before I tell you the how it's been effective and the way we thought about using it, I got to give you a little bit of a side story. Of course, this is played. I'm a retired firefighter, by the way, retired from the City of Flint Fire Department after about a 28-year career. And so my whole life, that's all I ever wanted to do. And I really poured myself into my community by doing that. And the reason I tell you that is because as a firefighter, we're professional. I was a professional firefighter, so I worked in a firehouse with other firefighters, which meant that we talked crap to each other, to put it lightly, right? And we chirped each other on every little thing. We're like chickens, a little peck of blood there. Yeah, they were on you, man. And it didn't really matter. It crossed all kinds of lines that really in the common workforce wouldn't be acceptable. But because we were more of a brotherhood, sisterhood, it became something that was normalized. But by the same token, we created commissions within the fire service for human relations, is what we called it then. Now it's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. So anyways, with that said, I could chirp pretty good. I kind of thought myself as being witty. And then when I play hockey, I know what chirping's all about. I've been on both sides of that, right? So when it's played here in Flint, I get people come up to me in the adult league, say, "Hey, Rico, when did you become the chirp police?" I'm just trying to figure you out. And I'm like, I know. So now when I go chirping, they go, "Hey, wait a minute. Code of conduct," and I can't do anything now, man, because of that video. But to tell you about that video, it was a vision that I had about, okay, so there's all these different layers within our sport, from participants to parents to coaching, the whole list. And the one area that I think really gets skipped over, the fans, and it's the most uncontrolled area that we have in our sport, right? You don't want to necessarily control fans, but you want them to understand that when you're part of our environment, that we're raising the bar on what's acceptable when you're at our games. It should have always been that way. And I think for a long period of time, the sport kind of attracted to more of a rowdier crowd. At least that's what the sentiment was. I mean, I'm from Flint, Michigan. The Flint Generals were here, and I went to games as a kid, as a youngster and a young man. And believe me, it was a different brand of hockey. It was still great hockey, but it was a whole different brand. And so now we're saying, hey, the OHL, these are 16 to 20-year-olds. We should not be having an environment that supports that rowdy atmosphere, fun atmosphere, exciting atmosphere. These players are all trying to make it to the show.
Sure.
Yes, but the rowdiness is not really a place that's acceptable here because it leads to unintentional acts of ignorance, I guess is the best way to put it. And so, anyways, I said I want to reach out to fans too, and I happened to go to a seminar called the Carnegie Initiative in Boston, Massachusetts this past January, and it was right around the time of Willie O'Ree's birthday, or not a birthday, but the date that he came into the league in January. So it was a lot of great things that I learned at this. And I was at a Boston Bruins game, and I looked up and I seen this video, and it was very similar to what you see here in the OHL, except ours is much. Theirs is for all their brands at TD Gardens, where I said that's what I needed. So what I did is I reached out to the Boston Bruins and their staff, and they gave me a capture of the video. I shared it with our team at the OHL, and what you see is what you get. Now, interesting enough, when I was reading through this, trying to decide how I wanted to come across, because I want you to have fun. I don't want to be like, hey, don't you say these things when you come to our games. I want it to be more inviting. And so at the end of it, I threw in the hashtag that we use, Game On. Out of the blue, it was all ad lib. Game On! Now when I look at it, I go, what did I think?
No, it's awesome. No, it's awesome. Man. It does work. Yeah.
You know, Rico, so, you know, you talk about a video like that, you're speaking to the fans, and obviously the nature of this show is speaking to the grassroots or minor hockey community primarily. But did you appreciate going into this that, you know, in communities like, you know, Sault Ste. Marie or Owen Sound, where, you know, the junior hockey team is such a staple in the community that the work that you're doing just has an opportunity to be amplified perhaps so much more given, you know, the status of hockey in our culture?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as I looked across the landscape, I have had a lot to learn. I have to be, and to no fault of my own, because I definitely don't feel bad about it, but I'm an American. I live in the States, and I don't know the gravity of hockey in some of the communities. And now that I've had a chance to go throughout Canada and talk with and visit in some of the communities, I realize that this is an incredible chance to lead the way in this space, particularly in Canada, particularly in Ontario. When it's interesting information for you to note that I'm the only person of color that you know works for the league, and but that's not a token situation. I'm not a performative checkbox.
Yeah.
I know after working and being a part of this league since 2020 that I'm a good fit for the league. They're looking for someone. They were looking for someone that can communicate what's appropriate about moving the needle forward and transforming our culture, right? And so I'd happen to be that type of person that communicates well and has a really good understanding of what a person needs, not what a person necessarily wants. Or a person needs to accept some of these things. So when you talk about Owen Sound, the difference is quite different than a Flint, Michigan. When you talk about demographics, the makeup of the people, the community, and each community within the 20 teams has a whole separate group of people that are under-indexed or underserved and have just not a connection to our sport in the right way. You know, it's a sport either they feel like they can't participate in for whatever the reason, or they don't want to participate in for whatever the reason. So that's kind of what my role is to break down barriers for all levels, whether it be the players, the coaching staffs, the business operations folks, the folks at the top of the board of governors even, and the commissioner, including myself. I've even had to learn a lot myself.
So Rico, with all those differences, there still is a collective similarity in terms of we all love hockey, right? We all love the sport. We talk about the benefits, the life lessons, and all that sort of stuff. But you also have a lived experience, and I know one of the conversations that you brought forward at our AGM was when you were officiating, when you started, when you started, you played, but then you got into I think you were a trainer, and then you got into being an official, right? And so maybe walk us through that experience, and because I think at the end of the day, like you say, you're not here to check a box. You're here because you love this sport and you want to make sure that that all those lessons we learn, that we think the sport can teach us and teach our young people. We want young people to be in our sport because of that, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do caution, before I tell the story, because it is an important story, because lived experiences are a true expression of what is real to a person. And if it's real to a person, someone else can have empathy. And if you have empathy, which 99% of people have that are part of any sport, let alone our sport,
sure,
they can learn and grow from and understand, there's a bigger reason. But, it's, a lot of times I think to myself, I have to be cautious when I tell the story, in the sense that I want to make sure that I talk about the transformation that has been made since I first began, because I want to make sure that people understand that the sport is much more welcoming than it used to be, even though it's still a long ways to go. We're working on it now, which wasn't happening when I first began.
Right.
So when I first began in the sport, I came in an unintentional way. I'll put it that way. I was an student athletic trainer because I wanted to be a firefighter, right? And so I knew that if I became an athletic trainer with that opportunity, I could get hands-on skills, working with real patients and doctors and those and whatnot. So anyways, I had a successful freshman year with the football team, and I helped out with the basketball team, and I got with the baseball team. I was all good. Sophomore year comes around, I'm a grade 10, and now I'm good enough to go get on with my own team. And so I had an opportunity to be with the hockey team. And at first I wasn't so sure. And then my next thought was, these guys get their teeth knocked out, so it's perfect for me. I'll get some action, right? Really, I didn't want anybody's teeth get knocked out. Let me just make sure that's clear. But I figured if it was going to happen, it was going to happen at a hockey game. But anyways, it was there that I knew a little bit about hockey. Like I said, I went to our local, International Hockey League team and watched a couple games. So I had an interest in it, but it was there that my interest grew, just watching it, from the ice level. And I asked the coach, can I learn how to skate? And that I say that if you see my face, because I remember his face, he was really cautious about the idea of me coming out there. He's worried I get hurt, while he's coaching. So anyways, I'm grabbing the boards around during practice. But I had one coach who took 10 minutes when the boys were warming up and showed me how to duck walk and all the other basic maneuvers and ice skating, and I took off. Before you knew it, I took off. And my love grew from there. And by the time I was grade 12, there was 19 guys that showed up for tryouts, and me. If 20 showed up, I was cut. I'll put it that way. I was counting them as they were coming in, too, guys. I was nervous. I was still nervous. Somebody that did, there was some travel players out there that I knew were out there. But anyways, but it was that same year that I was challenged by some referees that I had met when I was working in the league as a trainer, who said, hey, if you really want to get some ice time and learn the game inside out, you should become a referee, and not to mention you get paid a little. So trust me, it was a little, $6 back then for a game. I mean, goodness gracious. So would that be $4.75 Canadian in 1986? Right? So anyways,
amazing.
So I'm out there doing some games, and I was in my second month, I think, right around my second month, because I was starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. But I blew a call, and I was falling around a lot, guys. I was falling more than the players were, so it was I was a comedy act within itself, and I wasn't trying to, though, man. it was killing me that I couldn't stop. I was slamming into the end boards and pointing the goal behind me, you know, and it was terrible, but I was making it the best I could. And then 2 months in, I blew a call, and the coach called me over to scream at me. I knew what was coming, but as I got over, I didn't know what to expect exactly. And so I started I listened to the coach. He's blowing the stack, and then his assistant comes down the end of the bench, and then he starts going off, and my attention turned to him, and he drops the N word on me. I mean, he M-bombed me hard, and I'm respectful. A few years ago, I might have used the word to give you the impact that it made on me. But I think today it's not necessary to understand the impact that it made.
Yeah,
And it
right.
hurt really bad. And I can tell you that I wanted to leave the sport at that very second.
Right.
He told me he wanted to kick my tail out in the parking lot. And I was thinking being met with violence and being called a name that had never been called before, personally anyways. And so with that said, I was throwing my gear off in the locker room, and my senior partner who looked at me, he said, "What are you doing?" And I told him, and he says, "Hey man, if you leave here, you're doing exactly what he wanted to do, chase you out of this sport." He said, "Today's the day that you're going to grow up or you're going to stay a kid." And I looked at him sideways, to be honest with you, because I was like, "What are you talking about, man? You don't know what it's like." I was on what my thought was at that moment. But he said, "You're going to come across racist people in your life, and you get hit it head on, or you're going to go tuck and run. And the way you hit it head on is you face them down and not necessarily fight over it, but you prove to them that you're more than any word that ever could have hurt you." I did not have a clue what that would mean some 35, 36 years later, when I'm sitting here in front of you on this
Wow.
podcast talking about it wasn't the last time that I was dealt with racism in hockey. I wished it would have been. I didn't quit. Obviously, I'm still here. 36 seasons later, I still referee. But things have transpired. Now it's much more intentional if someone crosses that line when it comes to racist slurs and banter, hate speech. It is much more intentional. In the younger age groups, it is not quite as intentional, but it's mostly understood. Maybe they don't understand the gravity, like if you're talking about a 10-year-old, gravity of saying certain words, but you know that the line's been crossed for the most part. We understand language enough by the time we're 8 years old to understand that certain things can't be said, even 6. But what happens is, in my opinion, what fostered that throughout my career is people around me, right? So what one thing that would happen is my referee partners, in order for me to feel like I could get along, will come up to me and joke with me about the puck goes down and not up. It's not jump ball. Um, I've been told to go back to the country I came from before as an official. And it wasn't until the last 10 years or maybe less that people started to become allies around me and rally around me, which made a huge difference in how the situation was perceived and taken. So I guess what I'm saying, if you're watching this podcast, people ask me all the time, "Well, I'm a straight white male. What can I do when it comes to diversity and inclusion? I feel like I'm being pushed out of this." The first thing you need to know is inclusion does not mean push white people away. It does not mean that. It means include others into the conversation. Give them validity. Learn what they have to say, right? So that we understand more. It makes us stronger. The more you know, right?
Yeah.
Power is
Yeah.
in knowledge. And then the other thing is that it's so critical to create advocates and allies. So what that means is you stand up when someone's lost their mind, and it's hard as hell. If somebody's in the ice rink and they cross that line, sorry about that, and they cross that line, everybody around them feels awkward. That one person is in control and in power of the whole situation. Might trigger someone from the other team or the person that they're aiming the words at, but everybody around them is going, "Oh my gosh, this guy's a fool."
Right.
It is so critically important that in order to transform this culture that we have, that group of people take the step forward and say, no, dude, you're wrong. You have to own up to they have to own up to each other. On your team, say, no, you're representing me too. My kid's name is on the back of his jersey, but on the front is the same name that's on the front of your kid's jersey, or whatever the situation is in life. It's critical. That's how we won't have to say dissect this topic as much, because it'll become part of our culture. It's not acceptable. It never was acceptable. It never should have been acceptable. I guess it was acceptable at one point, but it should have never been acceptable. And here's the difference. Aaron and Ian, the time is now compared to 20 years ago.
Right.
Seriously. I mean, that's my point of my story, how we started this.
Yeah.
The time wasn't right then, right? I had to joke about being the only black guy in order to feel like I fit in. Where today, if I tried to do the same thing, my white friends or white people would look at me like, dude, you don't have to do that to fit in, right?
Yeah.
We're just hockey players. And so things are changing. Nowhere near at the speed we wanted or the distance we wanted, but they are. And we have to keep this movement going.
You know, Aaron, just before you jump in there, just because of what Rico said there, and it reminds me, you know, we've had similar conversations with Sheldon Kennedy with the Respect Group, and if there's one line that goes that Sheldon repeats all the time, and is empower the bystander, and that's exactly what you just said. Yes. Rico, you know, and Sheldon you know, he's got a different lived experience coming at it, you know, from a different set of circumstances, but the same principle applies across the board. Empower the bystander, be willing to speak up. I just wanted to mention that because I love that you said it, but I also love that it's I've heard this before. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, it's a common thread that again, if we're going to say transform the culture, what does that mean? That's what it means. It means that we're not going to stand for that anymore. We're not going to look the other way. We're going to step up, and then those folks will weed themselves out, and then they won't be a part of the flock anymore, and we won't have to worry about them. And then new people coming in will know, oh shit, they don't play that shit here. You know, I tell people, you have the freedom to think whatever you want, man. You can think the worst crap in the world about someone or something, but once it exits your mouth, there's consequences, and sometimes they're good, like in most instances, and sometimes they're not so good. So it depends on what consequence you're willing to sacrifice, you know, as to what you're saying. And so like I tell parents, hey, you guys can talk about whatever you want to with your son or daughter, or what about whatever, but when they get to their rink, they're under a different standard. It's not allowable here. Get back in the car, you can talk about it all over again. But they got to understand that once you get to our arenas, our rinks, and you're representing our sport, you can't do it here.
Well, you know, Rico, you talk about you know, the instances where these I guess these incidents occur, and I know that in the talk that you gave with the OMHA at their AGM. You referenced that you had spoken to a number of BIPOC players and staff in the OHL, and that I believe almost all of them had shared that as minor hockey players, that's where they were first exposed to, say, racist comments or those type of experiences. And listen, I think that's obviously hugely concerning, but I sense that as a hockey community, like there's two sides to this conversation. Obviously, when those things happen, we have to educate, but it's so important that, be it you know, the neighboring associations, the coaches on each bench, we need those people to be on the same page so that when those incidents do happen, everybody's a part of the conversation, and we're not talking at people. We're bringing that young person on side and saying, hey, you know what, this isn't right, but here's why it's not right, so that hopefully down the road they can be that empowered bystander to speak up.
You hit it right on the head, Aaron. From now that I've been in this role, I get emails, phone calls from all over the sport, both here in Michigan, all across North America, actually, about this. And what ends up happening in a lot of cases is a coach will defend a player's actions, not knowing if the player, just trying to save face on the team and not take the opportunity to say, even if you didn't say it, the perception is that you did or you didn't do this. So we're going to take this opportunity and learn about it. We as an organization don't stand for it, and we're going to let the other organization know exactly what our plan is, and we hope they do the same on their side of things. And if we want to exchange information, we can do that. So like one of the instances here in our state, I was called on a situation, and I said, well, before I go speak, I'm going to speak to both groups. The group that the victim was on, or the team rather.
Yeah.
And since the team where the offender was on didn't want to admit it, I was going to speak to the team, but not in an accusatory form,
Yeah.
just as a way to learn about why what we say matters and how you can control emotional maturity, coping mechanisms. Not like I'm some psychologist, but I'm a common sense approach person, and I know from my own experiences in hockey that's hard to control your emotions. I just had to do it last week during a game.
Yeah.
I smacked my stick on the glass, right? I was upset, but I didn't call anybody a name. I was just mad at myself for the play, right? I'm just saying, I'm just using an example that I'm real, and that's how I approach everything I do as a real person who has other people's experiences at hand, because I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to share, so that, we can all kind of learn and grow from each other.
Aaron, one of the things that when I met Rico that we talked about was the fact that this, Rico works for the OHL. It's a junior league, as he mentioned, 16 to 20-year-olds, and talked about what they're doing for their league, and Rico's talking to their teams, and again, dealing with issues as they arise, that sort of thing. But part of what I was really, impressed with was Rico, along with, Dave Branch and the leadership of the OHL. They wanted to have the connection down to minor hockey, because players don't just arrive in junior hockey and then all of a sudden stuff happens, right?
Right.
Like this happens. This, as you say, there's lots of influences on kids. They hear things, they see things, and to address that and really make this not a junior hocky, initiative. It's a hockey initiative, and I think,
Right.
and I think that's, I being in minor hockey, and that's where we live. I just such an appreciation for that mindset, that one, we're all hockey. We all players come from somewhere. So
Right.
where and when can we make a difference and impact? And again, it's not about hitting people, over the head, like bad, bad person, bad hockey. It's about let's address these things, because our sport is awesome, and we know there's all the awesome things we love about it. I mean, is that, I just wanted to say that, Rico, and I go, I'm pumping your tires, but I'm pumping your tires because of, like I say, of the commitment to not be, we're not segmenting the game, junior hockey, minor hockey, female hockey. We're just hockey. And I think that might be, that might be the thing I appreciate about what you're doing the most, is that willingness. And again, that comes from the top down. So I think it's important just to say it out loud, because I think, we want to, one, you're doing it, and two, we want to play a role in it. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but I it's important to me that I say that, because that's probably, like I say, one of the things that struck me most when we first got together. There was that willingness, to share, I guess, and to be part of a solution, again.
Yeah, and I can tell you, it did stem directly. Of course, let's face it. My whole existence on this platform is due to grassroots hockey. I mean, I'm the founder and director of the Flint Inner City Youth Hockey Program, where we introduced the sport here in Flint, Michigan, to kids that only reside in our city. The only qualifiers, you reside in the city and you're between the ages of 8 and 11. So I don't have a socioeconomic qualifier. I don't have a race qualifier. I don't have a gender qualifier. And that's on purpose, because if I'm to live the sport that hockey has lots of, it's cliched as a term now, and certainly it's a marketed term, hockey is for everyone. I typically look at it more like hockey is for anyone, because quite honestly, it is not for everyone. And I probably get stomped on the toes from my friends at the NHL for saying that. But my point is that I'm recognized through what we did here in Flint that while I can introduce the sport to all these kids, only a select few of them have what it takes to continue on. Even if I give them financial support, if they're one of 5 siblings, that one sibling is not going to be able to participate in hockey in that group, right? Not without incredible amounts of help. And that's just not feasible and reasonable. And so what I took along those lessons, and then when I was fortunate enough in 2019 to win the NHL's Willie O'Ree Community Hero Award, that's where all of a sudden Rico's on the big scene here. Now, with that being said, and the reason I bring that up, not because I want to pump my own air tires in my own air, because I want to let you know that that's how the first communication with Dave Branch was for my grassroots efforts, what I've done, what I bring to the table for grassroots. So that's always going to be part of what I'm trying to do with the OHL. And I understand that you have to build and grow this thing. I came here as the first person to ever do this work, so I don't have a blueprint, so I'm kind of designing it. But I want you and all the viewers, listeners to understand that we're working right now with Hockey Diversity Alliance and the Kingston Frontenacs and the OHL to provide some level of a grassroots program as a pilot there. It's still, probably shouldn't have said much about it, but it is, we're starting framework to develop that throughout the entire league. So if we can produce this in a Kingston, Ontario, we should be able to produce something similar in every market within the 20 teams. And that is a way we can not only help grow the sport, but get behind what we're talking about, put our names and utilize our teams to put their names, of course, and their work out front and center to grow the sport more organically. Because it's great to offer free tickets after you read to a group of students at a school, but it's typically one and done. We want to get them on the ice, get the feel of where the Frontenacs in this case skate, meet some of the players directly. We're going to help them with their first strides on ice, and then get them to a program, and then get them to games, obviously. And we're not looking for any one demographic, but we are specifically looking for under-indexed or non-traditional fan base. So that looks different in every community. That's why I say I don't want to go for a specific race, or I'm not looking just for poor people, but we're looking for people that typically don't go watch hockey to get them an opportunity to learn about this sport, maybe find themselves, like I have 16 kids who came through our program that play. 2 of them are captains on their teams that started with our program, and that's what we're looking for.
You know, Rigo, so it's funny. I this past weekend I was down in your neck of the woods. I live in Vancouver, but I was we host a conference at the University of Michigan, and I was at the Michigan State football game.
Ooh, yeah, baby.
Yeah, and there's like over 110,000 people in the stands, and of course in the build up to the game, and we happened to go into Detroit on Saturday morning, and everywhere you go, people are either wearing blue or green, and what it reinforced to me was that here's a place where this touched every segment of the population, and that people came together from a variety of different backgrounds, and they were connected through this thing. And there's a real power of sport, and I think that the work that you're doing and that the OHL is doing is so important, because there's few things in life that can bring people together, and it's not about bringing together people in sport. It's about bringing them together, I think, in sport, so that they feel more connected when they leave the arena or the field or the court or wherever they develop those relationships.
Well, listen, Aaron, one thing that I had to make sure is clear, because right now in the world of DEI, when you say those 3 letters together, they typically The first perception is the low-hanging fruit, our race, blacks and
Yeah.
whites. But it goes so much further than that. And I had to learn those lessons myself. I had blind spots with the LGBTQ plus community, had blind spots with the indigenous community just because they weren't in my face. I didn't know anybody that represented those communities. And certainly from my era and generation, I didn't have an identity or understanding of their communities. So that's why it's important to utilize myself as an example in this case of when you're sitting here going, well, okay, that's easy. I'm not a racist, but not understanding, wow, there's so many other people and so many other ideologies out here that we all are existing. We all have something that's common, the love of the sport of ice hockey. So if you see someone that doesn't look to you what's quote unquote cookie cutter normal, don't look at them as though they're profound. Look at them like, I'm glad they're here to enjoy the game with me or be a part of the sport with me. And that's the hardest part, I think, for most of us is trying to recognize, well, where do I fit into this? And I don't want to be force fed anything. I like to absorb stuff. But then folks don't take the time to get an opportunity or make an opportunity rather to absorb information and knowledge. So today is a perfect example. If you're still listening to this podcast, you're going to take the time, I believe, to absorb this and say to yourself, well, how do I feel? What do I think? Like, I'm not homophobic, but by the same token, I didn't understand so much to their being that I would sometimes look at a person as though they're profound to me. Well,
Sure.
now
Yeah.
I clearly understand they're not profound. They're just being themselves. And who am I to judge who they are, right? They're just here to watch a hockey game or be a part of, or whatever they're a part of that I'm a part of,
Yeah.
right? I should have and I think it's critical that we take this, this big picture, which is our whole world, and microcosm it into our sport. Once we do that, we'll have a real reflection of the world when we go to a hockey game. And you know how much more fun that is, right? And that's what I'm looking forward to the day when we all sit at a hockey game and we don't look at each other like, wow.
Yeah.
We just sit there and go, wow, woo, this game is fun. And that's all we're worried about, right? Our team's winning or losing, whatever the case may be.
No, and listen, man, that's exactly what it should be. And I think we can all, kind of relate that down to minor hockey where, that's, everybody in the rink should have that connectivity, that they're on the same team. One thing that I really liked about, and I think this is a really actionable takeaway for be it coaches or administrators from your talk at the OMHA AGM, was that just the power in having conversations and really learning about where players come from. So getting players in the room and understanding that that they're not from Kitchener, or they're not from Czechoslovakia, like where are they from? What did their grandparents do? What's their heritage? And then how much that can bring a group together. And it reminded me my first year, one of the most profound moments I've had in the sport. And at the time, it was one of the biggest regrets. Is I was coaching an assistant coach with the Quesnel Millionaires. We were on a bus trip, and we had a player named Josh Hector, really popular kid on the team. He was from Winnipeg. And in the back of the bus, some of the players were making some anti-Semitic remarks. And you could tell it wasn't like they were intentionally trying to be cruel. They thought it was funny. Like they just weren't educated. And all of a sudden, and I'm sitting there like, I wish I had to put my hand up and put a stop to it. There was other adults on the bus that were in a position to do so. But all of a sudden, Josh Hector puts his hand up and says, "Hey guys, would you say that if I was Jewish?" And they're like, "Well, you're not, so it doesn't matter." And he's like, "Well, no, I'm just asking you, would you say that if I was Jewish?" And they said, and they got uncomfortable. And he goes, "Well, I'm just telling you, I am Jewish, and I don't appreciate it. And I still like you, but just please don't say that around me anymore." And the bus was silent for about half an hour. Like nobody.
I bet it was.
And I just thought, but I think when I heard you make that comment, it brought me back to that moment, and that that should almost be an exercise for every team where a coach or whoever's in a place to do so. Like, let's just get to know everybody and understand that even if we're all white, we're all different. We all come from a different background, and try and bring everybody in and really celebrate why we're all different.
I am chomping at the bit, Aaron, because all the teams that I've spoke to this year, like compared to the first time around. I spoke to every team, but it's all virtual. So I hadn't been able to travel and
Yeah.
visit teams. And it's so much more important to visit these players in person, and you can feel the room, you can feel the energy, they can feel my energy. It's a lot different. But every time I've gone to speak to a team, that's exact exercise we use, Aaron.
That's
I
so
tell them
cool.
about myself, my own personal background, who I am, who my mom was, my grandparents. I mean, I've got a kind of a very interesting story about who I actually am. I mean, all right, I'll tell you as quickly as I can. So my mother's German, full-blooded German. She immigrated here in the 60s, met my father, who happens to be mixed with his mom is white and Native American, and his dad is African American, just for terms' sake.
Yeah.
And then they made Rico. But when you look back in my lineage, my grandfather on my mother's side from Germany fought for the Nazi regime against Poland on the front lines. Unfortunately, he was drafted into the situation. No matter what, that's where he was. And then my father on my grandfather on my father's side is a direct descendant of slavery because he's from Mobile, Alabama. So if you could ever imagine that those two entities will get together and create Rico, you
Yeah.
got to be out of your mind, right? How does that happen? But here I am. But what I do by sharing that story is I give every player in the room an opportunity to tell us who they are really, and it's really it's interesting to watch because some have never thought of themselves from a cultural standpoint. And the whole bottom line from that is exactly what you said, Aaron. Even though we're all similar, maybe the shade of our skin, we all have some differences, some different traditions, some different cultural things. And maybe we don't, and maybe we should. And that's what I try to talk about. Maybe now this is a time to identify more with, your faith or who you are, where you came from. And then what this does for players is it helps them identify with themselves and hopefully have some depth and try to understand others by the same token, by just hearing that go around the room. I mean, the coaches, whoever's in the room is going to be asked their makeup so that we all have a chance to appreciate each other from a cultural standpoint. And the feedback I've gotten is incredible. Just that the teams are typically tight by the time the season starts, but that even tightened these teams that we've talked to a little bit tighter, just because, like I said, they know who each other are. We don't. How often do Ian and Aaron sit around? Well, okay, what is your dad and what's your grandfather? Where'd they come from? It's not a typical conversation.
No.
I get it. And I'm not saying it should be necessarily, but if it were to come up, it'd be something that's worth talking about because I think I'm going to be as frank and honest as I can. I think many white people in North America are all of a sudden feeling attacked by the whole, it's time to think a whole different way, right? They don't necessarily perceive it the same way I put it, but that's what the bottom line is. And so I want to make sure it's clear, anybody that's paying attention today, this is about bringing us all closer together, whether it be in the sport of hockey or throughout life.
Yeah.
And all of you are not going to just buy in just easily, but what I'm asking you to do is listen to Aaron, Ian, and Rico and tell you that the transformation's happening. We want you to be a part of it, not a naysayer looking to the outside, wishing that we have failure to what we're hoping is successful. Try to be a part of it because it's going to make a big difference. We'll have more people playing. The sport will be much better if we all work harder to be, as one.
Well,
I know I sound like a preacher.
no,
I swear to you, I'm
no,
not. I'm just
no.
Rico.
But hey, amen, Rico. That's all I can say.
No, but I think it's so important. And I think it's to your point, it's funny because Ian and I went out for dinner last week and we didn't talk about our heritage, and maybe we should have. But I think my point is these conversations have to be facilitated. If we expect them, they're just going to happen organically. They probably won't, especially amongst young people. So as leaders in our sport, we've got to create the space to say, hey, we're going to talk about this, or we're going to talk about sexual orientation, or we're going to talk about, hey, a group of junior hockey players. What happens when you're, with a young woman? How are you going to handle that? Right. Let's talk about that so we're all clear on it. But no, listen, I think it's so powerful. But I'm encouraged, and it'd be interesting to hear your perspective, Rico. Like sometimes when we have these conversations with adults, there seems to be a need for some education. However, when I look at a lot of young people today, like they're already there. Like they already accept all this. Like this is second nature to them, and they're on the right track. I mean, through the conversations that you're having in the hockey community, is that the sense that you're getting?
Absolutely, without question. In fact, each one of those conversations I have with the teams, I make a point to say to the coaches, hey, these players, they already are aware. So if they do make a mistake, it's more intentional, which is one thing, but more likely they're not going to make the mistake.
Yeah.
So what we have to do, us older folks out here, is take that torch that's kind of burning a little bit dimmer than it used to and pass it off to these young folks.
Yeah.
And understand that they're not trying to make the whole world woke. First of all, what's wrong with being awake? That's a whole other thing.
No.
My point is that the word gets overused and understood.
Yeah.
That makes misunderstood. That's the word I'm looking for. Misunderstood. And so with that being said, what I'm saying is it's more important for folks that are in our age group and younger, because I'm telling you, the ones that are older are having a really difficult time because everything's just happening at once, right? The technology, it's hard to keep up with. It's hard to understand why everyone's being sensitive suddenly. But as I said earlier, the timing is now. And what we need to understand is that mistakes are going to be made by people, particularly young people. And we don't need to banish them and cancel them out. We need to encourage them to learn and educate. They continue to make the mistakes, then obviously this sport isn't for them. Us older folks, we need to understand that things are happening and we need to get ahead of the curve now, not behind it. So if you're watching right now and you coach a team in a rural segment of Ontario where race isn't an issue and you don't necessarily know of anybody that deals with sexual orientation or gender identity issues, that doesn't mean you don't talk about it. Because eventually you're going to go to a team and a community that is the case. Eventually these players are going to be adults. And if you help prepare them now, even though you maybe don't feel as confident preparing them, reach out. There's people like myself out there who will help you. It's so important you don't sit back on your hands and wait for an incident to happen to deal with it, because then the damage is done. Somebody's feelings are hurt or whatever, and your team looks like crap. Your player feels like crap. You feel like crap. When now you can look at this and say, well, you know what? As much as I don't want to believe what maybe he's saying, it is probably best to be ahead of the curve and learn a little bit and be ready just in case, because it's bound to happen because young people make mistakes. Now, when you get older and you make mistakes, you got to really work hard to gain back respect that you may have lost. But in the meantime, if it's all genuine and you have no ill intent, don't worry about it. So many people that I talk to, they worry about making mistakes with things they say. You know, is it African American? Is it African Canadian? Is it black? I don't know. Colored? No, don't say colored. Person of color, though? Yes. Right? So that's important that you learn. It's okay. Black person is okay in today's. And years ago, African American. Years and years before that, colored. Years and years before that, Negro. And I won't go back to what they were calling them way back when, right? So my point is that things evolve and change, and it's going to be difficult, but just hang on. We're going to be all right. I promise you. We're going to be a better place.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's interesting. And I came across this quote and I wanted to share it. And I thought it was timely. And it was Barack Obama was on the Pod Save America podcast last week. And he said that, sometimes people just want to not feel like they're walking on eggshells, and they want some acknowledgement that life is messy and that all of us at any given moment, you say things the wrong way, or you make mistakes. And I think it just goes to, if we all have the right intent, that we can support each other, we'll get through this, because it matters and it's important. Rico, you mentioned that people reach out to you. How do they do that? How do people want to continue this conversation? How can they find you?
Well, the easiest way is probably through email. It's rphillips@chl.ca. rphillips@chl.ca. And we'll start a conversation there. And if it's like some of the things I've done in the past is I've spoke to associations and groups of coaches, help them navigate some of this stuff. Because like I said, sometimes it's uncomfortable. How am I going to talk about someone's lived experience when I have no idea what it's like to live like, to be like that, and so I can help so that the advocacy feels stronger in some, and that's probably where a majority of people that reach out look for some help with how to be a good advocate. Because I'm going to be truthful. I can't be the indigenous Rico. I can't be the gay Rico. I can't be the Asian Rico. I can only be Rico. And so it's important. We can't have all those different members in the OHL. I have to be able to somehow represent these demographics that feel marginalized and are marginalized in most cases. So it's important, like what I have to do is learn about all of them and be the best advocate and have resources available for stuff I don't understand.
Well, listen, Rico, I think you're the Rico that's doing some really great work, and it's making a difference. And I know I'm out here on the West Coast, but your name keeps coming up more and more, and I think for all the right reasons. So, hopefully the products, this is going to inspire a lot more positive conversations. And I think just in general, put our young people in a position to succeed and stick together.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. I just want to make sure it's clear that even since I've been on this role, I've made mistakes and things I've said unintentionally, of course. And so I just want to make sure it's clear because of like you said, we don't want to feel like we're walking on eggshells. We want to live ourselves, and we're worried. But the way to get over that worry, just like before I go in a burning building, you know how I got good at doing that, where I wasn't scared? I practiced, I learned, I gained knowledge.
Yeah.
It gave me the bravery I needed. So I'm encouraging you to learn and get brave through your education of yourself, and you'll be fine. I promise you. Well, thank you guys so much, Ian and Aaron. What an awesome opportunity.
No, it's Rico. The privilege is ours, and I think I speak for Aaron when I say, we're inspired. We're inspired just on this conversation today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That means the most to me. That's why I do it. I mean,
well, it shows.
I could be retired right now, you guys. I could be retired. What am I going to eat today? And don't get me wrong. I still do. I'm semi-retired, I guess I'll say. But this is way more. It's a second calling, you guys. And I'm just enjoying every minute of it. So when you offered the opportunity, I couldn't wait to jump on it. And I hope the folks that are watching the podcast today enjoyed our time together. Please reach out if you need some help. I'm here for you.